Good evening, everyone! Today I'm reviewing the side-scrolling puzzle platformer Bionic Bay, a stylish cinematic adventure by developer Psychoflow Studio. If you like games like Limbo, then I think you're really gonna like this one. And yeah, I know that this particular style of platformer has gotten a bit crowded and overplayed in recent years, but I think Bionic Bay makes a strong case for its own existence with some clever mechanics and a nice variety of threats. As the story goes, a bunch of scientists are studying this alien giant grand egg when cracking it causes all of them to be sent to an alien world, and you play one of the only engineers to have survived this long. Over time, you'll encounter other failed scientists and see the last sort of data entry they gave right before death, almost this living but also digital diary of the corpse's decaying mind. While a lot of alien worlds thrive on the fantastical and the surreal, what makes Bionic Bay so interesting as a setting is its adjacency to industry. You'll be working your way through lots of giant machines and contraptions, factories, and hostile architecture. Now, I call the game a Limbo-like, but that's not 100% honest. I'd actually say the game has a similar feel to Out of This World, from its premise to its trial and error puzzling, but without the inputs being tied to animation, so there's no lag and the controls feel tight. The character is a bit floaty when jumping though, something that will set certain people off. I know that I care about the physics of the jump in any platformer I play, but as long as the levels are designed around the physics, then it doesn't bother me too much. Your character's moveset is not unlike 3D Mario's, where you have a slide jump and the ability to forward dash fall out of a jump, and you'll be chaining them quite a bit to launch yourself across large gaps. There is also edge grabbing and wall jumping, so there's a lot of appealing movement right from the beginning before we even get into the primary puzzle mechanics. Early on, you gain the ability to switch places with objects, which is definitely the primary puzzle type of the game. As long as an object qualifies, you can rub up to it and hit a button to designate it, and then another button to make the switch. You'll want to be careful not to find yourself underneath another object and crushed, but otherwise, you'd be surprised at just how quickly you'll not only get the hang of it, but start chaining it into your rolls as well, which you will need to do to get through some of the timed sequences, which I'll discuss a bit later. When I saw footage of the game prior to release, I kind of assumed that the swapping was the only real gameplay system, but I was surprised to see the game does also give you other abilities to mess around with in certain levels, like a super powerful punching fist and a slowdown ability. In general, there are some really novel and cute interactions in this game, like hanging off of stars in a constellation, or having to weave your way through tons of sensitive explosives. Stuff is just constantly falling apart or destroying itself. It's like a monument to chaos, a factory without any real purpose. It helps that your character pratfalls a lot, which is part of the humor of the game. Any real inadvertent contact will ragdoll you, and the game does take advantage of that for a lot of silly shenanigans. Something that people don't like about this particular style of adventure platformer is the trial and error aspect of it. You know, the original Out of This World, it kind of just sprung traps on you like it was designed by a trickster god. It's really the original I Want to Be the Guy in some sense. And Limbo definitely continued that trend with a lot of instant deaths that you barely have time to react to. So if you don't like that sort of thing, then this game might not be for you. But I will say the checkpoints are pretty frequent. Kinda like Lorne's Lore, another game I reviewed recently. As long as you're in a pretty safe place on a flat surface, the game will usually give you a checkpoint. So like, there can be multiple checkpoints a few feet apart from each other if there's a hazard in between. This, along with their really short load times, helps ease some of the rage you might otherwise start to build up. No puzzle or bit of action is too tough to overcome though. You won't be spending 500 lives in one 5-second section of game. You might spend 20 to 30 lives in a couple of spots, but they're relatively infrequent. Bionic Bay has some really solid puzzle variety, and each of the game's 23 levels has some new tricks and treats. One level has a sudden rocket you steer, and that's like the only time it happens in the game, and I really like those singular surprises. Another level is basically one big bounce house, and then there's this level with these little death balls, and some of them follow you around chirping excitedly, not realizing they're gonna kill you. It's the perfect metaphor for being a cat owner with allergies. Later levels mess with things like gravity, and right near the end of the campaign, you get the ability to rotate the world in what is easily the coolest level of the entire game. They definitely saved the best for last. It could have easily been disorienting and confusing, but again, the design is so strong that you'll be able to intuit how and when to rotate, including in the middle of jumps. If you feel up for an additional challenge, Bionic Bay has an online speedrun mode where you can compete against other people's times in selected sections of the game. So I mentioned it before, but there are chase sequences, and like a lot of chase sequences in games, I could take or leave them. But thankfully, they're not that long, so they're not like, say, the chases in Ori and the Blind Forest. You'll get a little bit of exciting music and maybe die a few times as you navigate a 15-second section requiring quick reflexes. Probably the hardest chase is right at the end of the game, but again, it's not too long, and they do give you a checkpoint at the halfway point. I think in general, if you prefer your puzzle games to be less reactive or requiring on-the-fly adjustments, then you might just hate this entire subgenre, honestly. Maybe don't play Limbo or Out of This World either. I will say though that I was kinda disappointed that I couldn't find secrets. I'd see little gaps in structures and objects that you can grab onto, but there's nothing to jump up into, and it would have been nice to have some sort of optional collectible, maybe something behind a really treacherous optional path of platforming and puzzling. It's not like the game suffers for lacking it, but what you see is basically what you get with the design. When it comes to the art direction, I think this is definitely one of the nicer looking games in the subgenre, so this is like a weird comparison, but at times the environments utilize light, color, and shadow in a similar way to Disney dark rides, and I really like that. It creates a sense of wonder despite the sort of brutal atmosphere at times. One of the achievements in the game refers to a mechanic as being theme park-like, so I don't think it's that out of left field. As the game goes on, you do eventually start to see some other biomes, which only add to the mystery, like a wintry region full of ice lasers, and this forest region that kinda snuck up on me. They do a good job of phasing the environments in slowly as you progress through the levels. Since the game relies on a lot of physics and ragdolling, the protagonist has tweeny, puppety animation, which I don't love. But I recognize that it's kinda necessary, and some of that procedural animation is most likely tied into edge detection and stuff. I don't have to like it, but I'm not gonna hate it. In general, I'd say they pretty much nailed it. On the sound design, I think it could have maybe been a little weirder. There is some decent sound work and they get the industrial atmosphere right, but I'd prefer if something sounded more off about it. I don't know. I do appreciate the restraint they have with music to only really bring it in for small important moments like the chases or discovering fellow scientists. For the UI, the game takes a minimalist approach with no HUD, but they will have button tutorials with hologram guides on occasion, which is sort of the limit on the video gaminess that you see. The only other time you'll see any kind of text is the corpse diaries, and they're decently readable even on the lower resolution screen of the Steam Deck. If you go into the menu, you'll see they've even included a visual of the Steam Deck, which is really nice. There's also a level selection menu, which I don't know how much the average player would actually use that, but I imagine it's pretty useful for content creators. If I'm being honest, I thought that I was kinda tired of Limbo likes, but Bionic Bay showed me that I'm really just tired of average ones. The constant surprises and frantic pacing elevated above its peers, on top of being well executed in pretty much every department. If you're sick of seeing games like this and think the platforming genre has become oversaturated in general, then this probably won't change your opinion. But if you're like me and you're waiting for a fresh take on the format, then Bionic Bay is the game you've been waiting for. If you have any game you'd like me to review, leave it in the comments below, but bear in mind I've already got the next few weeks mapped out. I'll be talking about X Zodiac on Thursday, Gal Guardians 2 and Stygian Outer Gods next week, and The Abandoned Planet the following week. If you like the sort of thing I'm doing, you can hit the like button and you can hit the subscribe button as well, and make sure to hit the bell. And of course, a special thanks to my indie darlings, Rob Scott, Tyler McBride, Nick Shalark, Tony Domenico, and Game Trekker. Thanks as always to everyone who supports me, and until next time, you'll find me in another castle.